In the humid summer of 1898, merchant steamships docking along the Scheldt Quays in Antwerp were unloading hundreds of tons of raw red rubber and harvested elephant ivory worth tens of millions of Belgian francs, with not a single centime appearing in the official national accounts of the Kingdom of Belgium. To the citizens of Brussels strolling past the newly erected monumental colonnades of the Cinquantenaire, or admiring the glittering glass palaces of the royal greenhouses at Leeken, their nation appeared to be experiencing a miraculous golden age of imperial prosperity, cultural refinement, and architectural grandeur. Belgium was a small, neutral, constitutional monarchy bordered by formidable European military giants, its independence guaranteed by international treaty, and its domestic politics governed by cautious parliamentarians, conservative Catholic ministries, and prudent financiers. Yet across the capital city, monumental urban construction projects were transforming Brussels on a scale unseen since the days of imperial Rome. Luxurious tree-lined boulevards, grandiose triumphal arches, palatial museums of Central Africa, and lavish private estates along the French Riviera were rising out of the earth as if conjured by magic. The public was told that these grand architectural wonders were gifts of royal benevolence, funded by the visionary commercial foresight of their sovereign. In the fashionable cafes of the Avenue Louise, the Belgian upper middle class congratulated themselves on possessing a monarch who brought international glory and commercial vitality to a nation that had achieved sovereign independence barely 68 years earlier. Overseas trade was booming. The port of Antwerp had rapidly become one of the busiest maritime clearinghouses on the European continent, and the Belgian franc stood firm against British sterling and the French franc. Every week, auction houses in Antwerp held frenzied sales of equatorial commodities, where commodity brokers from London, Hamburg, and Paris bid unprecedented sums for high-grade African wild rubber to feed the insatiable appetite of the booming Western industrial economies. Yet behind the ornate gilded gates of the royal palace of Brussels, King Leopold II was presiding over a financial empire, unlike anything the modern world had ever witnessed. He was not operating as the constitutional head of a sovereign European state, but as the sole proprietor, governing chairman, and unconstrained dictator of a private commercial corporation, spanning more than 2 million square kilometers in the heart of equatorial Africa. While European newspapers praised the king's selfless philanthropic mission to civilize dark continents, explore uncharted river basins, and abolish the slave trade, the true nature of his operation remained hidden behind layers of diplomatic fictions, fraudulent treaties, and offshore holding entities. The stage was set for the most ruthless resource extraction enterprise in modern history, a global financial mechanism that would transform an entire subcontinent into a private bank account, while disguising human subjugation as Christian philanthropy. In August 1908, in the subterranean furnace rooms beneath the royal palace in Brussels, royal servants spent 8 continuous days burning thousands of financial ledgers, accounting books, and private correspondence files under the direct personal supervision of King Leopold II. When Belgian government officials and parliamentary investigators demanded access to the records to determine the true financial assets and liabilities of the Congo Free State, the 73-year-old monarch coldly dismissed their inquiries, declaring to his closest aides, "I will give them my Congo, but they have no right to know what I did there." For generations, standard historical accounts treated the Congo Free State as a bizarre geographical anomaly, a philanthropic experiment that somehow went tragically astray in the tropical jungle. But the ashes of those destroyed financial ledgers concealed the true operational machinery of the enterprise. The Congo Free State was never a state in any recognized legal or political sense. It was a privately owned, sovereign corporate monopoly engineered to extract astronomical profits through coerced labor and offshore money laundering. To understand how King Leopold II created his private financial empire, one must examine the catastrophic fiscal crisis that nearly destroyed him in the late 1880s. When Leopold secured international recognition for his International Association of the Congo at the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885, he had presented himself to the world as a generous, selfless philanthropist dedicated to scientific exploration, free international trade, and the eradication of the East African Arab Swahili slave trade. The General Act of the Berlin Conference solemnly declared the Congo Basin a free trade zone, prohibiting any nation from levying import duties, charging discriminatory tariffs, or granting commercial monopolies, but maintaining sovereign administration over 900,000 square miles of dense equatorial rainforest, building fortified supply stations along thousands of miles of navigable rivers, and paying armed mercenary forces required astronomical sums of capital. Between 1876 and 1889, Leopold had completely exhausted his personal fortune. He had burned through his inherited wealth of 15 million francs from his father, Leopold I, and had borrowed millions more from private European banking syndicates, including the Banque de Paris et des Pays-Bas and the House of Rothschild. The construction of the crucial Matadi to Leopoldville Railway, a 240-mile engineering project built by the Compagnie du Chemin de Fer du Congo to bypass the impassable cataracts of the lower Congo River, was devouring millions of francs while claiming the lives of nearly 2,000 African, Chinese, and West Indian laborers. The Congo Free State was bleeding cash at an alarming rate of over 2 million francs every year, while generating less than 200,000 francs in meager export revenues from wild ivory and palm oil. Leopold was staring directly into personal bankruptcy, royal foreclosure, and sovereign default. If his private debts became public, the Belgian monarchy would be disgraced, his creditors would seize his royal properties, and his African empire would be partitioned among France, Britain, and Germany. Desperate for cash, Leopold turned to the Belgian Parliament in 1890, lobbying Prime Minister Auguste Biernaert for an emergency state bailout. In a secretive agreement signed in July 1890, the Belgian government granted Leopold an interest-free loan of 25 million francs, equivalent to over $120 million today, disbursed in an initial lump sum of 5 million francs followed by 2 million francs annually over 10 years. In return, Leopold wrote a secret will bequeathing the Congo Free State to the Belgian nation upon his death. But the king had no intention of waiting for death to collect his fortune. In 1891 and 1892, Leopold executed a series of radical, clandestine decrees that completely shattered the free trade guarantees of the Berlin Act. Under the legal fiction that the state owned all vacant land, Leopold declared that all natural products of the forest, specifically wild rubber and elephant ivory, were the exclusive private property of the state. Private merchants, both European and African, were prohibited from purchasing rubber or ivory from native populations under penalty of imprisonment. The Congo was partitioned into vast extraction zones. The domaine privé, private domain, owned directly by the state, and concession zones leased to private corporate syndicates in which Leopold retained 50% of the equity. Between 1896 and 1908, the global demand for natural rubber exploded following John Boyd Dunlop's invention of the pneumatic tire and the rapid rise of the automobile, bicycle, and electrical insulation industries. Raw rubber prices on the European market soared from 5 francs per kilogram to over 20 francs. The financial floodgates opened. Between 1896 and 1908, the Congo produced over 70,000 tons of rubber, generating more than 220 million francs in pure profit for Leopold and his concession partners. Shares in the Anglo-Belgian India Rubber Company, known as ABIR, which had been issued at 500 francs in 1892, skyrocketed to over 25,000 francs per share by 1900, paying annual dividend returns exceeding 1,000%. Shares in the Société Anversoise du Commerce, au Congo, experienced identical vertical surges, turning modest initial investments from Brussels financiers into multi-million franc fortunes. The near-bankrupt king had become one of the wealthiest men on the planet, all through the sovereign monopoly of a territory he had never personally visited. The architect of this colossal financial extraction machine was a man of cold, methodical ambition, driven by a lifelong resentment of the constitutional limits placed upon his royal power. Born in Brussels in 1835, Leopold Louis-Philippe Marie Victor of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha grew up in the shadow of Europe's great empires. Tall, physically imposing, with an aquiline nose and a calculating gaze, Leopold viewed his native Belgium with open contempt, famously describing it in private letters as a small country with small minds. From his early youth, Leopold was obsessed with acquiring an overseas colony that would provide him with the personal wealth, autocratic authority, and global prestige denied to him in Europe. In the 1850s and 1860s, while still Duke of Brabant, he traveled extensively across the Mediterranean, Egypt, India, and China, studying the financial mechanics of European colonial exploitation. He noted in the margins of his diary, "The only thing that counts is the net revenue produced for the sovereign. The colonies that produce the most revenue are those that are managed on commercial principles by the state." When Leopold ascended the throne in 1865, he spent a decade attempting to purchase colonies. Every attempt was rebuffed by established colonial powers or vetoed by the Belgian Parliament. Realizing that traditional colonial conquest was closed to him, Leopold adopted a strategy of deception. In 1878, he hired Henry Morton Stanley under a secretive private commercial contract. Over the next 5 years, Stanley established fortified trading posts and coerced over 450 illiterate local chiefs into signing fraudulent treaties. For bolts of cheap cotton cloth, beads, and empty brass buttons, the chiefs unknowingly surrendered their ancestral sovereignty and labor monopolies to Leopold's private organization. Leopold understood that before the European powers met in Berlin, he needed a diplomatic endorsement. He targeted the United States, dispatching General Henry Shelton Sanford to Washington, D.C. Sanford portrayed the International Association of the Congo as an American-style humanitarian project. President Chester A. Arthur, captivated by the rhetoric, officially recognized the association on April 22, 1884. Armed with American recognition, Leopold moved on Otto von Bismarck, arguing that giving the Congo Basin to a neutral, private association would prevent a dangerous military clash between Britain and France. To neutralize France, Leopold granted them a right of first refusal, droit de préférence, promising that if his enterprise collapsed, the territory would revert to France. Bismarck agreed, and the Berlin West Africa Conference recognized the Congo Free State as a sovereign entity with Leopold as its absolute ruler. Back in Brussels, Leopold leveraged his position to secure the 1890 loan. He told Prime Minister Bernard, "If Belgium refuses to assist me in this great work, I will abandon the Congo to France, and the shame of our failure will fall upon this ministry and upon the nation forever." On July 25, 1890, the Belgian Chamber of Deputies voted to approve the interest-free loan. While King Leopold presided over his empire from Brussels, shipping clerk Edward Denis Morel discovered the truth in Liverpool. Tasked with supervising the unloading of vessels from Antwerp, Morel noticed a mathematically impossible anomaly. Outbound ships carried no commercial trade goods, only military armaments, rifles, ammunition, and chicots. Meanwhile, inbound ships were bursting with rubber and ivory. Morel realized there was no commerce taking place. The native population was receiving nothing for their labor except bullets and chains. Refusing a promotion to maintain silence, Morel resigned in 1900 and launched a public campaign. He founded the West African Mail and the Congo Reform Association, transforming humanitarian gossip into an incontrovertible indictment of corporate financial crime. The only way to force millions of people to collect wild rubber was through systematic state terrorism. In 1891, Leopold established the Force Publique, an army of 19,000 African conscripts commanded by European mercenaries. They instituted a quota system enforced by seizing women and children as hostages. Floggings with the chicot were routine. To ensure ammunition was not wasted, soldiers were required to produce the severed right hand of a dead victim for every bullet fired. When soldiers missed shots, they routinely raided villages to cut off the hands of living people to balance their accounts. Historians calculate that between 1885 and 1908, the population of the Congo Basin was reduced by approximately 10 million people, half the total population. In 1901, Leopold created the Fondation de la Couronne, Crown Foundation. This top-secret entity was granted sovereign ownership over a massive tract of land 10 times the size of Belgium. It was structured as a private, extraterritorial trust exempt from public audits. Between 1901 and 1908, the foundation extracted over 66 million francs in pure profit, routed through German and French banks to finance Leopold's personal real estate empire across Europe. The international wall of secrecy collapsed in 1904 with the Casement Report. Roger Casement documented eyewitness testimonies and forensic evidence of systemic atrocities. Faced with international condemnation, Leopold negotiated the surrender of his colony in 1908, but not without a final commercial triumph. He forced the Belgian Parliament to pay him for his own atrocities, assuming 110 million francs in debt and paying Leopold a personal grant of gratitude of 50 million francs. Leopold was not an isolated aberration. He was the head of a sophisticated network of European capitalism, involving major financial institutions like the Société Générale de Belgique and international investors like Thomas Fortune Ryan and Daniel Guggenheim. The catastrophe of the Congo Free State was the logical culmination of an economic ideology that placed private profit and sovereign immunity above human life. The legacy reaches into our modern global economy as a warning of what occurs when sovereign authority and corporate interest merge without oversight. When institutions disguise predatory exploitation as progress, we must examine the balance sheets and the human cost. If you have made it this far, write the word monopoly in the comments below, as a reminder that behind every grand imperial monument sits an economic ledger that power sought to conceal. And if you rely on this channel for the hidden financial ledgers beneath official history, subscribe to Chrono Dominion and join us for the next investigation into the transactions the powerful hope time would quietly erase.